So, have you ever seen a boss die quite literally this fast? You might have an idea of what's kind of going on here, but Vex does it best. Hello, my fellow Vault Hunters. Hello, my fellow Vex mains. Are you ready for something that is absolutely hilariously broken? Now, a part of the engine dealing damage here you've probably seen around the place. Amon likes to take advantage of it, as does Rafa. But Vex can do it in a way that no one else can. Like this Ripper Queen, and I timed it, is just under literally 2 seconds from first damage to death. Which, even in the realm of the hilarity of broken things in Borderlands 4, is pretty tip-top, I feel like. So of course we got our big, lovely balance patch recently, buffs across the board, Vex included. And while there are certainly some positives here, nothing really stands out as kind of ridiculous. I was very excited for it, and I still am slowly testing through everything. I would love to make a sort of corrosive radiation Vex work, and of course Trouble. It would be nice to actually be able to deal the damage and not just be a support, but there's a lot to kind of think about, and none of these are sort of mind-blowingly huge. Hell, even just Incarnate, where Eldritch Blast is the damage, is fun and does have some potential. But what I was initially drawn to was, well, this. The Haruspex Phase Dagger damage increase, as well as just generally a little bit more support for melee. And indeed, more support for Reapers, too, one of my favourite things that Vex can, in fact, do. So these daggers in question, then, is Vex's only real melee support, which is why she doesn't really be the obvious choice when you're thinking of a melee build. That said, they give you a really powerful ranged option. Now, you have to be really quite close to the target to get the full effect and actually have all of them hit. That was a 71k, but if we are much closer, well, you can shotgun for upwards of 500,000, sometimes more when all your buffs are rolling. I've had this hit for nearly 1 million, which is a lot of instant impact damage. And that's very, very important. And then the other thing of big to note about Vex's melee is that it does respect her attunement. So now I will be meleeing with fire damage, which means I will then be throwing my daggers with fire damage. So if you start actually element matching the enemy, you just keep pulling out different weapons, changing your attunement as the health bars are represented, well, you actually get a huge buff to your melee too. And that's really, really nice to see. And then Bosch corrosive daggers. In any case, this is all well and good, and what I'm showing you now is the build operating without taking advantage of the sort of damage bug, let's call it, that really amps it up. It's still incredibly potent, incredibly viable, one-shotting most enemies with your quick little stabs, and shredding the boss at the end, and that's really, really nice. If you want to play melee Vex with Reapers, this is still the build for you. But if you want to really push it to 11, well, you probably know where we're going with this. Groundbreaker. This thing is, just a little bit silly. It obviously is applying way too much damage. It's storing up forever and ever and ever and ever, way past its cap, essentially infinitely. So obviously everyone can take advantage of this, but the real factor in properly abusing it is how much non-melee damage you can instantly apply up front and then just keep applying. And Vex, more than most, can really righteously leverage this. If I get rid of my daggers and then stab the dummy, we do 80,000 damage. The second stab up to about 600,000, and the third stab we kind of go to the 1.5 million mark. That's really nice ramping, but it's, you know, not the kind of ramping that kills a boss in literally 2 seconds. Whereas if I instead throw my daggers like so, and then start to melee, well, my second hit immediately takes it to 2.5 million damage, which is obviously a little bit hilarious. We're already losing the ramping now, but you see that difference. The amount of upfront immediately ramping into Groundbreaker that this lets you do is just ridiculous. Like, look at that, in 3 stabs. That's something that's hard to replicate anywhere else. And you gotta remember that although this is in my opinion, best way to abuse Groundbreaker and just instantly delete bosses, this is still the best way to play Reaper melee Vex. And if Groundbreaker ever gets fixed, then you can still use Groundbreaker and still get that intended 20% store buff, which is going to really push this even so, and it will remain a really competent, fun build for your Vexing going forward. And we know the nerfs are on their way. So while you can, well, enjoy this and have all the farming fun you could want, and then, you know what, keep playing it anyway, even once the knife gets changed, even once Groundbreaker gets changed, because like all the builds I like to show you guys, even without any abuse of ridiculous things, it's still at the end of the day a really solid, powerful, entertaining option. So with that said, let's get into the skill tree. And it's gonna look a little something like this. So we want to start by, well, pumping our cold iron. The reason for that is we will be, of course, translating gun damage into melee damage, so this is just a nice way to do that, and there's nothing better to spend points on. I've experimented with Curse Blade and Extra Cursed a lot, but the damage it adds just seems a little bit underwhelming. We then want to go full Fell Inscriptions to, again, just get a load more melee damage. Very, very tasty, very straightforward. After that, we get Portents of Suffering to amp up our status damage. We will be putting a lot of status damage on because we're always stabbing elementally, so we're always got a really nice chance of triggering status, along with our Reapers doing the same, especially once we get to some of the later skills. Then we get the nice newly buffed Recurrence, which is really, really nice. This will stack up very quick with your Reapers helping, and you end up with a load more melee damage, which is just good, but then a load more gun damage, which then translates into more melee damage. So this is just brilliant, and honestly, your Reapers will just kill bosses for you even if you're stood there AFK, of course a little bit slower. Then we get ourselves 5 points into Reverberations. This is one of Vex's just single best skill options, full stop. It does so much damage. We're meleeing for a lot, right? So if we then do an extra burst of incendiary damage for 150%, yeah, you can see why this is silly. Even in a normal world, this is silly, especially as your minions can spam do it as well, thanks to the augment we take, Hellish Harvest. This keeps your Reapers alive essentially the entire boss fight or set of enemies, and makes them triple hit, which is more chances for Reverberations. Then we also grab Grim Reaper as our only available Capstone anyway, and also he's really, really strong. We lastly get 3 points into Haruspex simply because we only have 3 left over once we've got everything else going on. Well, 2 as we need to get the 1 in order to get Pincushion, but this already makes it do plenty damage for our purposes. I think in a post-nerf world I'd fill this to 5, but we're not there yet. And then grab Pincushion to get the 5 daggers in the fan. And then lastly, Prismatic Ichor to double up on status effect, which is really, really nice. You know, we're exploding for fire damage, that's going to apply a big fire dot, this will then apply an even bigger dot of something else. You see how it kind of just tumbles forward as you stab away. Then in our phase Phamiliar, our red tree, also buffed Blood is Magic, more action skill damage for your Reapers. It's honestly just the kind of best option here out of everything, and we take it for that reason. And then Hasty Fiends, you really want the movement speed when you're stabbing, and you want the minions to always be on top of the target, so this is just nice, and the damage reduction is good, as we do want to maintain our shield. In fact, our shield is one of the big little secret sources that powers this. Then we get Claw and Bang, again buffed, and that's a lot of extra melee damage that we will happily accept. For your specialization tree then, what you want to have is Bare Arms, so your melee damage does benefit from your gun damage. You want to have I Am a Gun, so your Reapers benefit from your gun damage, and then you want to have Compounding Affliction, so all of these extra dots we're putting on increase the damage they take, and this is a lot stronger than it looks in how it functions. Then Then, if you want to righteously delete, you use Groundbreaker, and to be fair, even in a world this gets fixed, you'll still use it because it's still really strong, but if you don't want to use it for now, then instead you want Contamination, just to keep those status effects going, if you're willing to use the crit knife, so your melee hits do crit. If you don't, then you can do something like the best defense for just that extra 30% damage dealt. For your equipment then, starting with weapons, you want to have a element for each of the 3 main elements. You want a fire weapon, a shock weapon, and then a corrosive weapon. Now, you don't just want one of each. You obviously, do, so you can switch to the appropriate one for the health bar of the enemy you're facing, i.e. melee with shock against an all-shock health bar boss with shields, but you also want to care about the type of weapon, and I'll explain why once we're done with the general gear section. In any case, though, get that all good, and then make sure your 4th weapon is just a neutral kinetic weapon for bosses with mixed health bars, or for general enemies, or if you just can't be bothered switching weapons, because let's be honest, you do enough damage anyway. Then we move to our rep kit, where you want to have hard hitter for 40% more melee damage. Ideally on time dilation or triple bypass is the place to go, but just however you can get it, that's what you want. When it comes to our class mod, we want our lovely Teen Witch so that we can lifesteal into our shield and therefore get overshield. The extra skills are nice, but most importantly, it's that permanent overshield. We are meleeing for a lot of damage, which means we are functionally immortal, but more than that, it feeds into our shield of choice, which is what's for dinner. Now, technically speaking, you can use your heavyweight to get 100% extra melee damage, and that will work infinitely. As you can see, we just lifestealed our entire bar of armor, and you will always have armor to 100% times your melee damage. But I have found that in practice, well, what's for dinner actually adds more. And the reason for that is because when you have Overshield active, which you always do thanks to Teen Witch here, you just do a generic 25% multiplicative more shock damage. I.e., if you melee for 100k, you're just gonna pop on an extra 25k in shock, which is damage that isn't melee, which is damage that feeds into Groundbreaker, which makes everything just ramp that much quicker. And against actual shield health bars, it's even better. You can't really go wrong with either, and I think in a world where Groundbreaker gets put to its actual values, well, then your bare knuckle might actually come out on top, but for now, this is an absolute winner. Then when it comes to your grenade, obviously the best grenade is the Penetrator Augment, so all damage is crit for 5 seconds. Depending on how this gets nerfed, it's probably still going to be the best, even if it's down to like 20% chance, you're still going to use it on any build that doesn't need a specific grenade, so it sort of is what it is. Thankfully though, this isn't a bleed build, so it's not abusing the knife to go infinite damage, we're doing that a different way. So yeah, this is kind of your ideal, but shout out to Slippy for that huge amount of damage from your melee if you're feeling extra spicy. Then when it comes to your enhancement, obviously not a lot can affect melee going on here, but what you ideally want is to look for a enhancement that has gun equip speed on it. And this is one here for plus 100%, and I'll explain why in a moment. But when it comes to your firmware then, you want to have yourself 2 real big fist for that extra melee damage, then you want to have 1 action fist for that extra melee damage. After that, you can just do whatever you'd like. If you finish Action Fist, you increase your Reaper damage when you get a kill, you increase the damage by that extra 10%, and that's all well and good, but truly, once you've got 1 Action Fist and 2 Real Big Fist, you can fill out the last 2 with whatever you prefer. So, now that we've kind of gone over the setup here, a little bit of a melee tech on Vex. So, melee-wise, you spam your melee like so, and you can see how fast we actually do the stabbing. It's pretty quick how often you can hit. However, if I bring out something like this sniper rifle, watch what happens. I can only stab after pulling it back out, and then pulling the bolt back. It's like a third of the amount of stabs per time as holding the armored bod, for example. So this is what I was meaning. When you choose your weapons to make sure you've got one of each of the 3 main elements and then a kinetic, choose one like this fire here that doesn't slow your melee down and lets you spam it. So don't walk around with like 3 snipers like this trying to use it for your corrosive melee, because you just can't stab fast enough and it's not worth it. Whereas if I switch it from the stopgap to the golden god here, well, I can stab a lot faster. It's still a little bit slow, and I'd still want a better corrosive weapon, but it's at least quicker. And then we get that gun swap speed, so we can switch elements to switch our melee in order to best counter the health bars of the boss. How to play it then? Unless the boss is entirely 1 health bar, then I would make sure that the Reapers that you summon are just kinetic, so they can just do standard damage across the entire fight. And that will make them nice and consistent. And as you can see, they're really no slouches. They are fast approaching the 500,000 mark, and they really do pump out damage, which is why this is still going to be such a solid build, even in a world of any changes. And that gets the job done there. Other than that, you just want to be stabbing away, and doing so in the correct element gun for what you're facing. Your general rotation to, super delete a boss is you're arriving in the arena, you've summoned all your Reapers, you want to pull out your Grim Reaper last, you then want to hit your rep kit, you want to throw your knife in, then you want to hit the fan, and then just start stabbing, and it will already be dead after the 3. That was 33 million damage. Very, very straightforward. I hope then you have enjoyed this, a little post-patch buff inspired / discovery of how Vex can best abuse Groundbreaker that really does make it one of the current best builds in the game. Still will be plenty strong if anything changes, but for now, something you can have a grand old time with. Let me know if you like this, and indeed like the video if you did. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.